Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Talks with V. This season is on safety. But before we get into that, if you haven't already done so, make sure that you subscribe, and share with your community on Facebook and Instagram to share with everyone because this conversation is going to be a very impactful conversation. So, as you guys know, I'm working on a book and I decided to, basically shape this season around the book. And the book is called The Safest Place. So, we'll be talking about different areas of safety. And tonight we're going to discuss the safety within relationships, those romantic relationships. And honestly, I feel like it can go with relationships in general, but relationships as well as safety within our emotions. And our guest that we have joining us is teacher and also speaker, Drew Yaca. Did I say it correctly?
Yacu.
Yacu. Okay, Yacu. Well, welcome, Drew, to Talks with V. I'm so happy
Thank you
to
for
have
having
you
me.
with us. Yes. So interestingly enough, when I was working on this book, I was doing some research. And one of the first things when I was looking up different types of safety, um, I came across this article that popped up, and it was on the three elements of safety within a relationship. And those three elements are physical safety, and then emotional safety and relationship safety, which I thought was pretty interesting in doing that research because I'm like, relationship safety is okay. I need to know more about that. And so when I came across your content, Drew, I was so excited because I just felt like seen and I felt like you really get it. And, sometimes there's things that you have within, and you're just like, I guess, trying to put words to it, and you do that so effortlessly with your content, and the fact that you focus on helping and teaching people how to improve their romantic relationships, as well as their emotional maturity or emotional intelligence. I think that is so needed, especially for where we are today, when it comes to dating or even just having relationships with other, people. We're kind of struggling, and so I'm just grateful that you do this type of work, and just grateful to have you on today. So, Drew, if you could tell us a little bit about yourself and what it is that you do, and also how you got into the work that you do.
Yeah, sure. So, well, as long as I can remember, I was always fascinated with human behavior.
Mm,
I loved my first sociology class and psychology class when I was in high school, and had never been exposed to that work before. So, just was fascinated by how we think and how we feel, how we operate, our behavior. And I can't tell you why I was fascinated by it because
mm.
that question is, the answer is above my pay grade, but it was just something that gave me so much energy. And so I
Yeah.
just really nerded out on that's what my library was full of. In my spare time I would go and just learn and research, and then in a short period I was the person that everybody came to for relationship advice.
Mm.
And again, I don't
Oh.
know why, but it was just one of those things that if I look back to my 20s, it was like it found me rather than me finding it, and I
Mm.
just felt so drawn to it. So it took a long time, but finally here I am now in my 40s and making my life around this particular body of work, and taking the last 20 plus years of my understanding and awareness, and bringing it into something that is useful for people to having healthier, more fulfilling relationships.
Yes, absolutely. I agree. Yeah, sometimes those are the best. experiences, and honestly the best use of your time is when it's a situation where it is like it found you, it fell into your lap, it was just something that you had to do.
Yeah.
And I think that you found your calling, and I'm excited to see exactly where where it ends up going, because this is excellent. So I wanted to go into our questions and just kind of find out, how do you go about coaching couples when it comes to, or if it's joined or separately, so that they can find that safety within their relationships.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I have a curriculum. It's called The Path to Love, and it's really 3 chapters. The first chapter is the healing program. And the healing program, I'll talk about that in a moment. And the second chapter is the dating program, and separate for men and women. And then the third chapter is all about devotional relationships. And as I was creating the curriculum, I realized that it needs to be kind of in that order. First, you need to
Mhm.
understand, to heal what's going on in the
Right.
inside, the inner conflict, before you can have an enjoyable experience in the dating world. Otherwise, it'll just feel like it's awful, which is a lot of people's
Mhm.
experience today.
Yeah.
And or you'll get in a relationship that is riddled with conflict and disconnection and a lack of authenticity, and it doesn't feel safe, right? So
Mhm.
everybody needs to really have what I would call a healing practice, and they
Mhm.
have to know what it's like to create that safety within themselves first,
Mhm.
so
Mhm.
that they can then, it's practiced over and over and over again within oneself. And only then, when you're pretty well practiced, can you take it into the confines of a relationship and
Mhm.
make your partner feel safe when they are being triggered or when they are having a difficult experience, so that you can essentially create that level of nurturance and allow them to be vulnerable and express without feeling afraid of being rejected or
Mhm.
abandoned by you.
Yeah.
So it really starts from the inside before it can operate in the outside.
Oh, that's so true. I love that. It's just have a foundation and a place where you have a solid, like foundation of what's going on, like where you are currently, and so that you can tackle it, with a plan. You're not all rocky trying to figure out what's going on. I think it's important for us to be honest with ourselves so that we can kind of unpack what is going on, so that we can have a realistic starting point
Mm.
of what we need to work on, so we
It's
can be better, right?
it's very true. And if you look out into the world of relationship advice today,
Mm.
because I love to read everything. I'm a little nerdy on the science, and I just geek out on the topics. But the majority of the content out there that I've seen so far is, how do two people navigate the other person's wounds? So
Mm.
essentially, like, imagine if these wounds were, I look at them as like these minefields, right? And so
Oh,
if
wow.
you can't see mine, right, and I
Uh-huh.
can't see yours because they're invisible, they're inside of me, right? They're in my emotional center,
Mm-hmm.
and you're not trying to upset me. Nobody wakes up in the morning and says, how can I really upset my partner today?
Right.
And then something that I say or I do or I don't say or I don't do will inadvertently, step on one of these landmines, and it goes off and we have an argument and we have conflict. So today, the most of the advice is in, how do you navigate around and not trigger the other person?
Mm-hmm.
Or when you do trigger the other person, how do you repair that,
Right.
and then get back to normal? But then what's interesting with emotional wounds is that they don't go away if you just repair the conflict. So my
Mm.
view is different. My view is, let's not try to navigate around each other's wounds and try to dance around what we're not supposed to say, or how we're supposed to say this in a different way. Why don't we clear the minefield, right, in each of us? And that way you
Right.
can dance and play wherever you want. And
Yes.
then
Safely.
someone, you take the ego out of the equation. Like, you don't get a bruised ego when the ego has become fully integrated into the system, right?
Mm.
You don't need to worry and watch what you say and do,
Yeah.
because you're operating more out of love on the inside, because the wounds are cleared, and now you really have a lot more freedom to grow together.
That's so good. That is so good. And that's where I believe we all want to be. It's just the how, right? And
Yeah,
so I think that that's so good because you just mapped it out. So made it seem easy, but that is something that we need to, I guess, look at it from that perspective because it is hard when you're dealing with someone you feel like you have to tiptoe around things or, like as you said, landmines, invisible landmines.
yeah,
And, you know, that just seems stressful.
it
And
is. It takes a lot of energy, right? It takes a lot
yeah.
of work, and this is why this is why there's the expression relationships are hard work or work,
Mhm,
right?
mhm,
It's
yeah.
only because we are operating with wounded adults. And
Mm,
so it
makes
is
sense.
hard when you are trying to operate in a world where you don't know what's going to set off your partner. You
Mm,
don't know, right? I mean, you'll maybe get that over time. Okay, do it this way, don't do it that way. He likes it this way, he doesn't like it that way. But
yeah.
again, it's exhausting to try to remember all that, right? So it's
Mm,
just so much easier when individuals can take responsibility for their own emotional state, right? And so that way, entering into a conscious relationship where it's like, okay, we love each other. That's already been established. And I'm going to do things by accident that will upset you, right? And that will trigger you, right? That will bring
right.
something to the surface. I don't intend to do that. And I will, be here with you while you're able to navigate that and be able to do your own healing practice. And I'll create that environment to support you. But you and I are responsible for our own emotions. We're not
Mm,
responsible for the other person's emotional state, right? We
yeah,
influence it, we support it, we nurture it, we guide it, but ultimately we're there as the co-pilot, not as the pilot.
right. Oh, it's so good. Well, I mean, speaking about emotions, as you said, emotional intelligence is a buzzword these days, and it's important. I'm not going to say that it's not. It's very important. It just does seem sometimes when something becomes like popular, it takes the value out of it because it's just like everyone's talking about it and they're like, yeah, emotional intelligence, or whatever, the topic is. And it's like everyone kind of is playing on it, and then the dust settles and nothing is getting done. There's no actual progress, being made. And so I think it's really important. And the people who understand that, I think we have to kind of still be adamant about keeping this, conversation going for the people who actually want to improve it. So, my question for you is, um, how do you work, or how do you help men and women um, with developing emotional maturity or emotional intelligence?
Yeah, so I'm glad you brought up both words, right? Because
Mhm.
I think we are a very intellectual society, right?
Okay.
We've really built our world on, the world of the mind. And
Hmm.
so the concept of emotional intelligence is almost a misnomer because emotion lives here and intelligence lives here.
Hmm.
So we've become really good at describing the problem cognitively, right? With this part of our awareness. And
Right.
what you described, you also called it emotional maturity.
Hmm.
So maturity would mean the integration of
Hmm.
that information, of that insight, and now it's embodied in the individual. So they actually become the mature version. And right now, and it's totally okay, right? We have to learn about an idea before we can integrate an idea. So
Right.
it starts with intelligence. But because we spend so much time thinking about what it is to be emotionally intelligent, we actually don't embody the work. And so it's
Mhm.
changing, that the world is really evolving, and we're seeing a lot of somatic evolution because as we
Mm.
start to transcend our wounds, we really feel it in our body, right? So it's really a visceral experience. And in my work, the vast majority of the somatic release is through crying. And so my people
Mm.
that come through the healing program, if they're doing a healing session with me, they will go back deep into their into their wounds and revisit the past and heal the past, and they release, right? There's an actual somatic release. They are crying through the experience and they're letting that trauma go. And
Yeah.
in that moment, they're actually becoming the very person. They're evolving, they're transforming and letting things move through the body, which
Right.
is such an important and it's inherent to the transformational process.
Ugh.
Instead of just thinking about like what it's like to be the other person, because unless it's let go, it just remains buried and it will come up in other ways.
It's becoming. Yeah, that's so good and beautifully said. I was talking to someone the other day, and I was telling them they kind of had this aha moment that they hadn't been present for a long time, and they're like, I feel like my life is falling apart. Like I am more behind than I thought was. I thought was in a good place. But once I started looking at everything, I'm like, oh, wow, like I am nowhere close. And so they were kind of going through it. And I said, but it's okay, because now, you're becoming your higher self. You're leaving your lower vibrational self, your lower self behind. And I'm like, it's true, because you have the light bulbs went off, right? And
Yeah.
you've had your aha moment. You know that the things that you were doing were not serving you, and it was not basically taking you to the place that you want, to be. So now that you have realized that and have acknowledged that out loud, you're already, a few steps, ahead, because now you're going to change, And as my sister always tells me, she says, awareness does the work. So it's so true, because once you know, now you know better, you'll do better, as they say, right? So
Maybe if you know better, you
maybe,
don't always do better, right? But knowing is required to doing better. You have to know it
yeah,
before you can
okay.
become it. But there's a lot of folks that are still in the knowing, and this is all part of their curriculum. It's not,
Yeah.
I all think everything is divine and it's in its own perfect timing. So I call it getting just staying in a loop, right? You could be in a mental loop for decades, for 10 years, 20
True.
years, 30 years.
That's true.
And that's
Yeah.
all knowing, and then finally there's a point at which somebody reaches at the end. They're at the end of some kind of rope, and they
Uh-huh.
surrender. They actually let go.
Okay.
This is the transformational, like we call it like a midlife crisis, but these midlife crises are happening all the time in maybe smaller increments. And as
Okay.
I have come to understand it, it's so that we can learn to surrender, that we can learn
Hmm.
to let go of the control of the oars and try to not to row so hard down the river, and let go and see where the river takes us. And the only way you do that is by trying to think your way out of the problem over and over and over again. And you can't, because it's not a mental solution, it's an emotional solution. And that process of surrender drops you into your heart, and you finally, it's people are on their knees and they let go and they let God, like is another expression, of course. So it's meant to drive you crazy up here so that you finally say, I'm going to move into here.
That's good. I guess I was thinking about it I was thinking about it as far as knowing, like, when you really know, because I feel like when you keep making the same mistake, you don't really know, you don't fully understand it. But yeah, I guess maybe it is the surrendering process, is just not wanting to, because you do have your free will, and some people do choose willingly to not, do better. Maybe it's the optimistic side of me that makes me think they just still don't know. But yeah, maybe it is
Yeah,
about
I
them
think a lot
just
of it's
surrendering.
unconscious. So
Yeah.
like knowing information at the, and I at the
Yes.
cerebral level, at the prefrontal cortex, like the thinking brain,
Mhm.
uh, it doesn't solve the problems which because they exist in the lower parts of our brain, the older parts of our brain, the limbic system. So we can want we can want change all we want, but until we really release and let go into the older structures, which are the feeling parts of our being, then it just stays wishful thinking, right? It's people. I really believe in people's inherent desire to want to be better. They just don't know how, right? Which is why, I mean, even as a society, we look at therapy, right? Cognitive behavioral therapy. With people can be in therapy for years and years and years and years, right? And maybe 10 years or more. At that point, I would suggest that maybe it's not working, right?
Maybe, maybe they need
the
something
approach
else.
is not solving anything. And we've learned so much in the last 20, 30 years about trauma to really go deep into the body and really go deep into the somatic layer and the limbic layer and be able to excavate some of those old childhood wounds and treat them with love and compassion and curiosity and acceptance.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. And you make a good point, because there's some people who are not very open to therapy. I know some people, and I'm trying to understand their perspective. And I do see that there are other outlets, other things that you can do that are therapeutic. It doesn't necessarily have to be a therapist, right? And some people have had bad experiences with that. So it is important, especially for me, because, I'm a helper and, I want people to be well. I love people. And so I do like learning about those different types of outlets. And I, in the process of writing this book and, working on myself and just trying to heal old wounds, I learned about EDMR and the tap therapy. And I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. And so it was really fascinating. I'm like, it's very interesting, all the ways that we can, take care of ourselves that we don't, or that we don't know anything about. And so I love going to the University of YouTube and learning new things and, checking out different articles or interviews, because they're very helpful, like this one.
A lot of good stuff out there.
Yeah, for sure. All right. So when I think of emotional intelligence or emotional maturity, I believe that there's some correlation with creating safety within. From your perspective, is that true?
Yeah, I don't think it could be any more true, right? It is the probably the foundational concept that if I were to say what is emotional maturity, I could describe it as the safety to be oneself fully within oneself. So,
Wow.
the word that always comes to mind for me is acceptance. And if you've ever had a criticizing thought, like some part of you that is saying some negative things about you or another part of you, right? We all typically can relate to this idea of the inner critic.
Yeah.
And so emotional safety would suggest that critic's voice is accepted. And the majority of us are fighting against the critic. We don't like to be under the attack of an internal critic. It doesn't feel good to feel that you're not good enough.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel good to feel like you're a failure. It doesn't feel, especially that voice that calls you all these names and maybe uses language that is quite abrasive, right? And quite mean and nasty.
Yeah.
So emotional safety, the work would actually suggest that you turn towards that voice and ask it to tell you more, to get to know that part of you, to allow that part of you to feel safe enough to criticize however it wants, to say as much nasty things as it wants to, because it currently feels very fearful and it's doing all of these things, believe it or not, for your own safety. It's just doing them in a very misguided way. And so as we turn towards these parts that are very contentious inside of us, that cause conflict, they then start to feel safe. And once
Mm.
they start to feel safe, they start to calm down and they're not so angry anymore. They let the anger out.
Ah,
Like they feel like they just need to keep pushing because they're being turned away from. It's like when a child is trying to get her mom's attention, but the mom, mom's facing away. The child will keep tugging on her mom's, jeans if it's a very young child, saying, "Mom, I want your attention," but mom is
right,
facing away. And so we do that within
right.
ourselves to our
Mm.
own parts, to our own inner children, especially the critic. When the critic is talking, we definitely don't want to face it. That
Wow.
just makes the critic get louder, stronger, more fierce, more
Aggressive.
aggressive.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
what you resist will start to persist. So when we
Mm.
turn towards, that is the path of safety, where the
Right.
critic actually feels safe.
Mm.
And I think that that's probably a concept that we're just starting to understand a little bit more and more, because
Right.
that's what love is. Love says, I love you no matter what. Love has no condition. So even if you're saying nasty things, I love you, because that is the definition of what love is. Love
Right.
has no condition for it to
Mhm.
exist. Love is unconditional.
No, that's good. And I never thought about it that way. Because I was like, wait, hold on. As you're talking, I'm like, really? Like, no. And then I'm like, I get it. Yeah. It's just going to become more aggressive. It's just like, yeah, when you're growing up and you can't do anything, like, so you have strict parents, and then the minute that you get that freedom, you're, charging the opposite direction, as fast as you can, as aggressively as you can. It's extreme. And if there would have been a little bit more flexibility, a little bit more grace, in that process, that reaction would not be so extreme. And from what you're saying, I can see that, in so many areas. It's just like, okay, you know, be better, by accepting, right? And we do have to kind of put it all out there on the table so we can really see ourselves, because it's you, all of that to you,
All of
right?
it's here. Yeah. 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 We
Yeah.
have so many parts that we're ashamed of.
Yeah.
And those parts here, how
Uh-huh.
much we're ashamed of them. Like I would
Mhm.
say that
Mhm.
probably one of the biggest topics is body,
Mhm.
shame. It is
Yeah.
pervasive. And I live in California. So men are under this as much as women are. They are very
Yes, it's crazy.
conscious of their physical appearance. And so, when we look in the mirror, what are we saying? Like, what words do we say? Do we accept our bodies no matter what? Or are we nitpicking? Are we choosing parts that we like? And do we
Mm,
wish different parts were different? And do we
yeah,
wish we had? And so, all of that is non acceptance. All
right.
of
It's
that is
interesting.
internal shame, right?
Yeah.
We're pointing out the things that we don't like, or should I say, a part of us is pointing out the things that it doesn't like about other parts of us, namely our,
Mm,
physical body.
right.
And we can take that in terms of competency, in terms of career success, in terms of marital status, in terms of, parenting success. And all these things are topics by
Mhm,
which we internally blame and criticize and shame ourselves. And so that creates a lot of inner conflict, and it will
right.
spill out into the outer world in our relationships as outer conflict.
Right. No, that makes so much sense. Sorry, I was turning that on. That's so good. And honestly, I do believe that that did help me as well, as just looking at myself. And I had actually, on my healing journey, I started off with a friend, and we did these readings, and he offered some of the workshops that he had been in, some of the material, and then the book readings that they suggested for them to read. Well, they did. And I did that, and I really start to see myself, like all of myself. I think sometimes because we don't always see ourselves, and because we're kind of under the radar, and other people accept you, or they say certain things about you. If you have, a level of that approval, you feel like, oh, well, I'm good, and tell, the things that are kind of building up, those little things, all those little things start build up. And then it comes to the surface that you have to deal with you, right? And so when I started to see all of myself, I think I'm a good person and I do love who I am. But when I started to see all of those things, I was just like, no, that is not me. And I wasn't being honest, with myself. So then I had a choice. I get to, now that I know this information, now that I see these things that I may not be as happy with, that need to change, now I have a choice that I can work on those things to improve them, but also still accept me, and that's that honesty, like about who you are and what it is that you want to be. And then you can take an honest approach of how you're going to work on yourself to be this person that you want to be, because it's a desire inside, within. And then for those things that maybe other people don't like about you, but that is who you are, getting comfortable with being yourself unapologetically. And that is what I, began to learn, to do. And I was just like, oh, and it started to feel better in the inside. And I was healing. I was starting to heal. And so, yeah, that's such a great point that you made. Let's go on to our next question. Is a person who doesn't have, can a person who doesn't have emotional maturity still have a healthy relationship, from what you've learned, the people that you work with? And
Yeah. No. They can have a functional relationship and they can have a very fulfilling relationship.
okay.
But it requires hierarchy. So let's take, if we look back, it'll just even the last 150 years, right? For many, many, many more years before that, we've lived in a very hierarchical world, right? So essentially there was, the woman was dependent on the man,
Yeah.
up until I don't even think in the 1950s, it was difficult for a woman to get a bank account, let alone, get a job where she could accumulate enough money to buy her own home and be fully independent. So this idea of independence for an entire half of the species is new. Like if you look at how long we've been around on the planet, like it's not even 100 years that we have women who are fully, now today, any woman will be fully independent. There's no requirement for her to depend on a man when she's in her adult life. And that's been true for about the past 50 years.
Okay.
And so when we're talking about unhealthy on the inside or unhealed parts of themselves, because you're going to remove that dependency layer, right? There's no hierarchy anymore, because I believe we're moving to egalitarian relationships, partnership, where both people are exactly, the relationship is there for both people to live freely, to express themselves exactly as they are without having to placate to the other person's needs. So both needs are met. And if that's the case, if there's wounds, right, they will come up because you will want to be authentic. You will want to express yourselves. You will not be okay being suppressed in a hierarchical relationship. You want an equal partnership. Yeah. And as such, if there's a lot of internal wounding, then someone's going to walk away. Someone will say, I'm not going to deal with not being able to say my what I want to speak or be able to get my needs met, or you get to do what you want to do, but I don't get to do what I want to do. That's not okay with me, because now I have a level of standards of how I treat myself. And I'm not here to be in a hierarchical relationship. I'm here to be in a partnership. And you cannot have true partnership, unless two people are committed to healing. You don't have to be healed. You just have to recognize that, yes, there are wounds and we are healing side by side, right? We're going to do this alongside one another and support each other in that journey.
Right.
If someone's not even willing to look at the fact that they have wounds and that they want to control the other person, that in itself is a wound, right? Love doesn't say, you need to do what I want you to do. Love says, I love you so much, you can feel free to choose what you want to do. Right. And
Mm,
that's an interdependent relationship. So we go from dependency to
yeah.
independent, that's healing, two independent people, and then two independent people in a relationship is an
Inter-
interdependent relationship where you independently provide and give to each other in this beautiful dynamic of giving and receiving. Masculine,
mm,
feminine energies are just dancing with each other within both people.
mm. I love that. Sounds so beautiful.
It's where we're going. I mean, the fact that you're here and you're talking about it, and this is a topic that you really are interested in, just
Hmm.
says that that is the trajectory of your life as well, right? That
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
not in a place where you are still okay with a hierarchical relationship. You're absolutely committed to partnership, and
Yes.
there will be men that will be able to relate to that, and men that won't.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I mean, I've learned so much about myself, and I learned that I wasn't really dating men who thought like that or even were thinking about even going that direction. And so I had to make some changes because that's the direction I'm trying to go. And it's very important, in coupling, joining together with someone to be in alignment, so that you don't feel like you're constantly being pulled another direction. And then you have the guilt, you have the whole thing of, well, I need to honor, like when it comes to marriage, honor my husband, and it's completely against my personal values, or some of the things that are like deal breakers that I just know, it's going to create a miserable life. And I don't want that. Right. And so, but it's given me a lot of peace, to be able to let go of certain people who, are not in alignment with me. And, it's good for the both of us because neither one of us need to be in each other's way, trying to hold on to someone. And sometimes this happens. There are people right now who are holding on to someone who, if the longer that they stay together, they're going to eventually become toxic, and hurtful to each other. They're not going to make each other better. And I think that is, the a healthy relationship is when you all come together and you help each other, become better just in existing, and the way that you respect each other and the way that you allow each other to share, all the different parts of themselves, of yourself, so that other person is able to learn you, but also just be enlightened because you're learning something about this other person. And there are probably many people that are out there that are like that. And one day you'll have children and maybe your child will be like that. And so you're getting that head start, to be able to understand this type of person, so that, you know, you can have better relationships as well. And so I'm excited about the journey, and I'm glad that I continue to learn because I love to learn and just continue to work on myself. And eventually, I'll have a partner who uh, feels the same way, and we'll be rock stars together.
It was interesting. I recently heard from an old client,
Mhm,
and she has gone through the healing program and a dating program. And she
mhm.
just reached out to me and told me a story about how on a first date, right? So she met someone, they got to know each other through the app, and they made, she finally made the decision, yeah, this person feels safe enough for me to go out and I'd love to get to know him. And on their first date, they talked about their healing practice. Like she was just surprised
Like
that there
that.
was a male in the world, right, that would bring
Oh yeah,
something like this. She didn't bring it up. He brought it up. And so the fact that they talked about it, and she talked about, the healing program that she went through. She talked
yeah,
about her, specifics. So they got to really show themselves. Now they had been building, right? They'd been communicating
yeah,
before meeting one another. So there was a lot of safety built into that.
yeah,
Um, but the fact that that's now something that we're able and not ashamed to
yeah.
bring forward and
Right.
actually have open conversations about, just I mean, 10 years ago, that would have been difficult to do.
Oh
20
yeah.
years ago, it would have been impossible to do, right? You would have
Yeah,
just, that would have been kept in the confines of your therapist's office. But
yeah.
today we can openly say, you know, this is, and in fact, I see, like, I watch dating shows a lot because it's part of like I love it first and foremost, but it's also good
Yeah.
research. And one of the questions I hear people ask all the time is, how was your childhood? You know,
Yeah.
that's never was a question on dating. How was your childhood? What are your parents together? Are they divorced? Did that have an impact on you, et cetera, et cetera? So
Right. It's
it's
going to make a difference, you
yeah,
know, just knowing that information. Cause I don't know. I was dealing with a guy and he did have a rough background, and his parents, his mom was on drugs, and then he was pretty much left in the hospital um, uh, to die, you know, but he was okay. Oh, he was trying to recover because she was on drugs when she had him, and this couple ended up adopting him. It was everything was like divine how it came together. But his story was very interesting, and he was in therapy, and so I thought, like, yeah, I'm
yeah.
hitting a good one because he's in therapy, you know, and that's the early stages of me, you know, healing in different areas. But it didn't work out. And my therapist said, yeah, I could have told you that because of the backgrounds, the way your upbringings is so drastically different. You are putting a strain on yourself, you know, going into something with someone whose background is so different. I was like, well, he was adopted. He was raised by two parents, you know, and I was raised by, you know, two parents, you know, and he was just like, yeah, but it's not quite the same because of the trauma, you know, that was involved. And it showed up. It showed up within the relationship, the insecurities, you know, still having some of the abandonment issues and things like that. So yeah,
Yeah. That's
but
a
you
big
learn.
deal.
Yeah, yeah. And I don't think,
And he was actually abandoned by his actual mother. So that's
yeah, yeah.
I think that's probably the deepest that a child
Wounds,
would.
yeah,
It's the biggest fear that we all have, is that, you know, our
yeah,
parents don't love us and they will leave us. And
yeah.
that actually happened to him and it not because of what, because she was
Because she
under a lot of
wanted to. It was
strain.
just
Yeah,
drugs.
she was probably, her circumstances were, I imagine, very, very tenuous, and
Yeah,
she was unable to care for a young child. So she, you know,
right,
did the right thing, and he was
right,
able to have a life.
right. Exactly, exactly. And it's I don't think that we will count someone out. I don't think every time you count someone out, because there are some people who come from have a background like that, and then they end up with someone who came from, you know, a happy, loving, healthy, you know, home. I do think that sometimes there are certain conversations that can come up, you know, that comparison, because just like I said earlier, sometimes when everything looks really good on the outside and it's socially acceptable, you don't really know that you have issues or different wounds. And so, two people coming together like that, you're going to compare upbringing. Like, well, you don't understand this because you were fed with a silver spoon and your life was good. Your dad tucked you in at night, blah, 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 you know, all these different things. And then sometimes you can end up attacking each other. And so I don't think that we should throw a person away. You know, you possibly could have something, but it really depends on where you are in your healing journey. And that, you know, will be able to tell you if this is something that can be, you know, successful or not. And when I was talking to that gentleman, great, really good guy, you know, but when I was dealing with him, I still had a lot of work to do. I just started, you know, really, you know, healing. And so I was kind of having some moments. There was things that were, I opened up a lot, you know, just opened my whole emotions, my heart, all of that. And then so it's just out there, you know. And
Yeah.
I was still trying to figure out, okay, hold on, let's not have everything exposed. And so I wasn't really ready. I wasn't ready. And yes, he wasn't for me, but I still wasn't ready. And I think that it was a good move, to end in that relationship. So,
Yeah.
or
We always learn something.
that start. Well, you shared so many great tips and I mean, just great feedback. I wanted to give you an opportunity to share if there was any final thoughts or additional tips, for individuals who are out there and they're just wanting to get started um, on this. Maybe they're in a relationship and they want to be in this relationship, but they know that they have to work on themselves. What would be like your advice for them?
Two things.
In this
The first is I was asked recently, what is the biggest challenge with all relationships? And it
situation?
took me a moment because I'd never been asked that. And I love that question.
Mhm.
And the biggest challenge is that we're not independent, that
Mm,
we are dependent. And if you look out in the world, the vast majority of relationships are two people dependent on one another for their own well-being.
mm,
So what
mm.
healing does
Crazy.
is it removes the dependencies that you have on this other person to feel a certain type of way, to feel good, to feel nourished, to feel
Mm,
secure, to feel safe. And it takes that responsibility off the other person and it brings it into oneself. So you become independent, right?
mm,
A healthy relationship or a healing relationship is when couples are moving from that state of dependence into independence. And
mhm.
now you're on a whole new platform, right? They
Right,
are, you don't look at the other person as the reason that you're happy or the reason that you're
right.
not happy.
Are responsible for it. Yeah.
You are that. You take on that role, right?
Yes.
And from there, oh my God, so many things are possible. And
Yeah.
so I would suggest for anybody watching, if you're in a relationship, there's a likelihood of dependency, and that's okay. It's not your fault. It's just the
Mhm.
way we are today as a species, right? Everybody
Right.
has it. So just look at it, look to what is the healing journey that you want to go on.
Mm.
So many different ways to do it. Google it, right? Type it into Chat GPT or go to YouTube and then find something that you align with, that you love
Yeah.
to do, right? That's part of your own personal work. And just like we take care of our physical bodies, we need to take care of our emotional bodies. And that
Yes.
is what
Amen
is
to
referred
that.
to as a healing journey. So go on
Oh,
one and, let me know how it goes and, find me on Instagram and I'd love to hear your story.
oh, I love that. Yes, yes, do that. And speaking of Instagram, um, go ahead and share. I would love for you to share your platform where the audience can find you if they
Yeah.
want to, you know, get your services or if they just want to follow you and learn from you or
Yeah,
ease their
I would
way
suggest
into
that. I would
it.
suggest, yeah, start with curiosity, right? I'm
Yeah.
I'm a big fan because I work in the world of healing, and the last thing that I ever want to do is sell healing because
Yeah.
it's on someone else's term. I want them to feel sovereign in their own
Mhm.
decision. I want someone to feel empowered like a king or a queen to say, this is for me. And so just follow the work, at Drew Yacu. It's DREWYACU. And that's in my Instagram handle. And if you resonate with anything, great. And if you ever want to, write me a DM, great. I love contact. That's how we got in touch, right? You just reached out to me and here we are like
Yeah,
a
I'm
week
so
later. So
excited.
having this
I'm like, I
conversation.
love this, everything on here. I'm like,
So
oh
it's
my,
a
oh,
beautiful
and then come
world.
off to, yeah, I was very excited, just to see, your content. And I was like, yeah, like, yeah, I was just thinking about this the other day, and it was like the answer. So I said, let me get in touch with this guy and see if we could, be friends. Come onto my show, teach
Absolutely.
us all. So no, I totally appreciate it, and I'm so glad that we were able to do this. And for the audience, I will definitely put the link to his Instagram so that you all can follow him and just, gain some insight or even peace of mind or feel seen, like I said, I felt after reading several posts. So I hope you all really enjoyed this show. I enjoyed it so much. I'll be looking back at it for those times that I need to remember. And just thank you so much for joining us this evening, to my beautiful audience. And we will see you all next time. Have a great night.
Thank you.